Hello, this is Graham. In this video, we're going to introduce the concept of the inner child, its roots in Greek and Roman mythology, how it was developed by Jung, the consequences of it in our understanding of the human psyche, and how we can begin to understand and address its impact in ourselves and our clients. We finish with an exploration of the work of Alice Miller, one of the most prolific explorers of this idea. The concept of the inner child is an idea that has proved very useful in helping clients to understand their behaviour and find ways of transforming it. It's metaphorical, it's very real, but it doesn't exist literally. The idea is simple. We were all children once, and we still have that child within us, even though most adults are oblivious to it. This is the inner child. It has two parts. One is our capacity for innocence, wonder, awe, joy, sensitivity, and playfulness. The other is our accumulated childhood pain, trauma, anger, and fear. The concept of the inner child was first implied by Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung developed the idea, describing it as puer aeternus in males and puella aeterna in females. The image of a child within us is so easy to relate to that it's been used in many pop psychology and self-help books. Among these are the works of John Bradshaw, Alice Miller, and Eric Berne. The phrase puer aeternus comes from the Roman poet Ovid, who lived from around 43 BCE to 17 CE. In his poem Metamorphoses, he wrote about a child god, Iacchus. That's one of his Greek names. The Roman equivalent is Bacchus, and described him as Puer aeternus, the eternal boy. Elsewhere, Iacchus is identified with Eros. The eternal boy, as Bacchus, would engage in drunken binges, a life without cares, partying and playing jokes, and interestingly, experiencing religious ecstasy and other fitting types of mental disturbance. The eternal boy, as Eros, his Roman name was Cupid, indulged in anything to do with love and sex. The female equivalents were Aphrodite and Venus. There's nothing wrong with a carefree life, and this character is described as bipolar in mythology. Indeed, Eros is also the god of friendship and freedom. The key here, though, is of an eternal child operating in an adult world. Carl Jung drew heavily on mythology to provide metaphors for his ideas about the human psyche. He adopted the concept of the puer aeternus, sometimes called puer animus or just animus, when it's describing the masculine child within an adult, and puella aeterna, sometimes called puella anima or just anima, when it's describing the feminine child within an adult. You'll find that I often use the terms anima and animus to describe stereotypically feminine and masculine traits, but without implying that they are associated with a particular gender. According to Jung, the puer aeternus has a further shadow side, known as the senex, which is Latin for old man, which he associated with the Greek god Cronus. The senex is disciplined, controlled, responsible, rational, and orderly. The problem with this link is that Cronos was a thoroughly nasty individual. He was prone to killing and eating anyone that he saw as a threat to him, including his 6 children. Worse still, his friends and relatives would give him an emetic to get him to throw them back up again. But I don't think we're going to worry too much about him here. In Jungian terms, alongside the careless, debauched, freedom-seeking symptoms of puer psychology are dreams of imprisonment, images of chains, bars, cages, being trapped, and bondage. Those experiencing it will often see life as being a kind of prison. Some classics of literature refer to the Puer aeternus phenomenon, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. So what does this phenomenon have to do with psychotherapy? Puer psychology is based on the idea that we have been taught that to become adults, our inner child has to be suppressed, dispatched to our unconscious. If they were aware of the concept, the vast majority of grown-ups would be convinced that they have achieved this. However, the inner child reveals itself in 4 ways. Firstly, most mental disorders can be related to in terms of it. Secondly, most destructive behaviour in adults stems from it. Thirdly, neediness, dependency, and the fear of being abandoned all originate within it. And finally, the angry refusal by some people to behave responsibly does too. These expressions of the inner child may allow the adult to function well, certainly for a while and after a fashion. But to the objective observer, as the counsellor might hope to be, they are all about us. Most adults are not adults at all. They are children in an adult's body, a hurt, frightened child, desperately trying to engage in an adult world. They struggle to have adult relationships with a sense of responsibility and permanence, screwing around, shacking up, then abandoning a succession of partners. They try to build a career, but only to feed their habit of getting paralytic on Friday nights, stoned on Saturdays, and laid that night or crashed out on a mate's sofa. Or perhaps they feel anxious, afraid, insecure, tiny, lost, or alone. And if they can, they retreat to mother or father, sometimes the actual ones who scarred them as children, sometimes to a life partner who is a surrogate. How could any child survive in this kind of adult world? How then do we heal our own inner child or that of our clients? Stephen Diamond, writing in Psychology Today in 2008, spelt out some of the key steps. We have to become aware of our own inner child. We have to bring it back from the unconscious. Then we need to take it seriously. We need to talk to it, to listen to it. We have to understand what it truly feels and what it truly needs. It needs to be loved, accepted, protected, nurtured, and understood. The things it needed then are the things it needs most today. Diamond refers to the bitter pill. We have to understand and accept that those needs that we had when we were children were not met by our imperfect parents or carers, and they never will be. As adults, we can never put this right. We can never get someone else to do so either, no matter how clever, good, attractive, loving, or spiritual we try to be. The only person who can understand these needs and be a good enough parent is the individual themselves. We do so in exactly the same way that a good enough parent would do, through open, honest, undistorted conversation, and by providing our own discipline, limits, boundaries, and structure. Alice Miller was a Polish-Swiss psychotherapist born in 1923 who became very well known when she wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child, the English language version of which appeared in 1981. Miller's work, although much of it is theoretical, is incredibly influential. In the introduction to The Drama of the Gifted Child, she states, "Experience has taught us that we have only one enduring weapon in our struggle against mental illness. the emotional discovery and emotional acceptance of the truth in the individual and unique history of our childhood. She became extremely critical of established schools of therapy, especially the Freudian and Jungian ones. Miller considered that the cause of most mental health issues, addictions, crime, and religious cultism as being suppressed rage and pain. This rage and pain was in response to psychological abuse, on its own or associated with physical and sexual abuse, experienced during childhood. She referred to those who worked with people to enable them to interpret their story and to express their rage and anger as they came to understand it as enlightened witnesses. Miller's view was that established therapies revolve around the protection of parents, sparing them from blame and perpetuating the fifth commandment, "Honor thy father and thy mother." She described ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, as a campaign against the act of remembering. She argued that the never-ending violence that we see in the world has its roots in the use of physical discipline against young children. Children are forbidden from defending themselves. They have to suppress their fear and rage, and they can only express these as adults on their own children or on whole populations. As she said, child abuse, like beating and humiliating, not only produces unhappy and confused children, not only destructive teenagers and abusive parents, but thus also a confused, irrationally functioning society. The recent film, Who's Afraid of Alice Miller, explores the tragic relationship between Miller and her son Martin.